much do I try to control things versus how much do I just let things be? And the beautiful thing about a Camino is that you can often just let things be. And that actually takes a tremendous load off of your head, your shoulders, your back. And I walked that first Camino with the intention of becoming a better version of myself. I wanted to return home as, Blaine 2.0, a better husband, a better father, a better colleague, just a better person. I didn't have any way to define that necessarily. It's a great lesson to bring back home, that if we can find a way to live more simply, it actually reduces a lot of stress. I mean, on the Camino, there aren't that many things that you're doing. I mean, you get up in the morning and you start walking, and at some point you stop. I didn't really realize that I had this ability to expand my feelings, and I started to experience things on the Camino at a deeper understanding, like not just understanding intellectually, but from a feeling, from a heart place. Well, I do think regardless of what route you take, the ability to try to let go of expectations, of planning. There's so much out there. I mean, you're providing an example of valuable information that people who are either brand new to the Camino or just thinking about it, or maybe they've walked Caminos, they enjoy listening to you and the people that you interview.
Welcome, pilgrims, to the Way to the White podcast. Before the Camino became part of his history, our guest was navigated life through career responsibilities and routine until a deeper calling led him to the ancient path of the Camino de Santiago. In 2024, he walked the solitary Via de la Plata from Seville to Santiago, a journey that challenged not only his body but transformed his soul. So, welcome, Blaine. How are you doing today?
I'm very good. How are you?
Good. So, thank you for accepting our invitation.
My pleasure.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about that Camino, that long Camino that a few pilgrims have made, because this is a different pilgrimage, because you are facing so many factors that you do not consider in other Caminos, and the heat may be one of them. So because Seville is very warm at some part of the year. So I would like to hear from you. When was the time that you was walking that Camino of the year?
I walked in the fall, so September and October.
Okay.
And actually,
how was the heat?
I'm sorry?
How was the heat at the time?
The heat at the beginning, it was still quite warm in Seville at that time of year, but I was heading north as the fall was progressing. So the weather was getting colder and wetter the farther north I got. Actually, the people that walk the Via de la Plata, the most common time to walk it is the springtime, because the weather is nice in Seville, maybe not quite nice up north yet, but by the time people make their way across the country, it starts to improve as they go. And the summertime actually it's highly recommended that nobody be on the Via de la Plata in the summer, because the heat is quite intense. There have been people that have actually, lost their lives because of the heat.
Oh, wow.
But it wasn't that bad for me. In fact, when I walked the Francés, which was also in September and October of 2018, it was pretty much in the 90s when I started that journey too. So that it didn't last, forever, but it starts hot and then gets cooler.
Okay. How many Caminos have you walked?
I've done two. I did the Francés in 2018 from Saint Jean to Finisterre, and then I did the Via de la Plata in 2024, 6 years later.
Okay, and in 2024, you also went all the way to Finisterre, or just to Santiago?
I did not. I stopped in Santiago. It was over 1,000 kilometers. I thought that was enough.
Oh, yeah. For sure. Actually, the person that I interviewed prior to you, he walked from Denmark to Santiago.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
So,
I've heard of people that do that. That's quite a feat.
Yeah, 3,500 kilometers.
Wow. Yeah.
About 5 months, he was telling me.
Okay. That's commitment.
Okay, yeah. So what made you consider that first Camino in 2018?
Well, like many people in the United States, I didn't know anything about the Camino until I saw the movie The Way. And it was just one of those things where I immediately knew this is something that I will do. I didn't know why. I didn't really know when. I didn't know how. But I just knew after seeing that film that that was a spiritual journey I wanted to take. And several
Okay.
years later, all of the pieces kind of came in place where I could, take that time away from work and family. Um, and I walked that first Camino with the intention of becoming a better version of myself. I wanted to return home as, Blaine 2.0, a better husband, a better father, a better colleague, just a better person. And I didn't have any way to define that necessarily. Like I didn't have
Okay.
specific things that I wanted to change about myself, but I just thought that kind of a journey would help me to be a better human being.
Okay. Why you consider that?
Why did I even consider that?
What I mean, why you mentioned that's the way to transformation a person when go to the Camino.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think to me, I mean, there's lots of reasons why people do the Camino, and not everybody does it for spiritual reasons. Some people walk the Camino as a form of exercise or endurance, and some people it's a very social event, and maybe they even walk with family or friends, and it's more of a celebration of just spending time together. But I felt like I needed to remove myself from my normal everyday life and all the distractions and all the technology and all of the things that are kind of my normal world and put myself in a foreign country where I wasn't going to be able to speak the language very well. In fact, I'd never been to Spain prior to 2018, and just experience a lot of nature and time alone. Um, and have that be a transformative experience. That's really what I was seeking.
Okay. Then how was then after you return back? How was that experience that you lived there those like about a month, and once you return back to the US?
Yeah, well, I really do think it was transformational. I describe it as life changing. And people often ask, well, can you be specific? Like what changed? And there's so many things, but the best way that I can describe how I came back, and this started to happen for me when I was on the Camino, was that my heart just started to open. Now, I didn't realize it was closed. I mean, I didn't really realize that I had this ability to expand my feelings. Um, and I started to experience things on the Camino at a deeper understanding, like not just understanding intellectually, but from a feeling, from a heart place. I really started to um, understand things at a much deeper level and experience emotions that I typically in my normal daily life didn't experience. And that carried over even when I returned back home and got right back. I immediately was back to work and surrounded by all the normal things that I'm always surrounded by. And that has stayed with me actually, although one of the reasons, because when I came back from the Francés, I didn't have any intention of doing another Camino. I mean, I knew there were people that did lots of Caminos, but I kind of thought of it as being a once in a lifetime experience and not something that I would do again. But over the years, now if you think about our world from 2018 to 2024, we've been through a lot of stuff, right? I mean, a global pandemic for one, right? And not only had there just been all of these things happening in the world, but I felt like the effects of the Camino were wearing off. I started to see myself going back to that version of Blaine that I was before the Camino. And so I literally felt like I needed a booster shot. I needed to get back on the Camino. And when I decided to do the Via de la Plata again, I really didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how it was going to affect me and if it was going to bring back what I felt was missing. But I just felt like I need to go back to Spain. It was calling me, basically. It was calling me back. And that's why I returned 6 years later in 2024.
Okay. And then you are a speaker, and then you have been in several conferences, different places. And with the people that you have been doing those conferences, have you talked with them about your experience in the Camino?
Yeah, I mean, some of the topics that I like to speak about the most, even though I speak to business audiences, and so most of the presentations that I do at conferences are related to the industry that I'm in, and they're kind of designed to help people be better at doing the work that they do. But after coming back from that first Camino, um, I felt like I had different stories to tell that would not just be about helping people to become better at their jobs, but helping us all become better human beings. And so I started to create presentations that were about this experience that I had had in Spain. And I did the same thing after I came back from the Via de la Plata. And what I found is that audiences, while they appreciate the more business practical presentations for the fact that it can help them, do more business, for instance, um, by sharing a personal journey, even though there may be nobody in the room that even knows about the Camino or has any interest in walking across Spain, what I've discovered is that by sharing things that are so personal, which again, that goes back to the opening of the heart. I didn't really share a lot of personal things in my presentations prior to walking the Camino. There was the personal side of Blaine and there was the business side of Blaine. And normally when I was doing my business, I didn't really share a lot of things about me. It wasn't that I'm uncomfortable doing that. If somebody were to ask me, anything about myself, I'm happy to share it. But I didn't intentionally put that kind of stuff into my presentations. And that changed after the first Camino. I started being much more transparent and authentic and sharing things about myself that were very vulnerable. And what I found was that that's what impacted the audiences, because they would then see themselves not walking across Spain like I was doing, but they would take those things that I was sharing and bring those things into their own life and their own experiences. And what I discovered was that when you share things that are very personal, you're actually sharing things that are universal, they're just the human condition, so to speak. And I've had incredible response from people who have shared with me afterwards things that they thought of and the impact that my presentation had on them that has nothing to do with walking across Spain. It has to do with the things that I'm sharing about my experience that then they can have their own experience, if you will, while they're listening.
Yes. So there is for me, there is a big connection between what we can experience on an experience like the Camino, and not necessarily have to be in Spain. It can be here in the US as well. But the fact that you are walking for so long, you have time for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that you can see with your optic different scenarios that are easier that on your day-to-day life probably you don't see it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and to your point, you don't have to go to Spain for a month. I mean, just getting away, I think it does help to be in a natural environment, to kind of get out of a city and into nature, to slow things down a little bit, to maybe disconnect from all of the technology that we're so attached to. Even if someone were to just do that for a few days, many people experience that if they go camping or they just go hiking for a couple of days. It's very, it's almost like a renewal, if you will. It's almost like you kind of reset yourself. But I tend to do things that are rather extreme. So the idea of walking 500 miles and taking a month to do it was actually very appealing to me, even though most people probably think, oh, that seems like a little too much.
Yeah. And then not necessarily you need to walk 500 miles at once if you want to go to Spain.
Absolutely.
You can do it also by section if something that you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Okay. And then being you the speaker and being talking with so many audiences, how do you think that experiences like that may help in a professional life for someone?
Well, I think any experience that challenges you, that pushes you to do things that maybe you didn't know you could, or that are uncomfortable. I mean, I really believe that transformation requires discomfort. It's one of the reasons I think why so many people want some type of change in their life, but they don't want to go through the pain or the discomfort that might be required to make that change. So, forcing yourself to do something different or challenging or frankly just hard, painful. I mean, the Camino can be painful. It can be painful physically. It can be painful emotionally. You come out the other side of that with skills and with a sense of accomplishment that then can translate into all those different parts of your life, whether it be professionally or with your family. I've just found for myself that doing those types of things where you have an intention of accomplishing something that's really a large task, it's not just the accomplishing that thing, it's how it changes you along the way, and then those changes affect all the rest of your life. And so certainly, I'd like to think that I have improved myself as a human, and it certainly it doesn't always show up. I mean, there are many times when I feel like, gosh, Blaine, you're just being that person you were before. But I'm certain that the fact that my heart opened, that shows up in the work that I do, that shows up with my family. I mean, that shows up in all these different parts of my life.
Yeah, it is amazing the power that experiences like the Camino has on a person. And so then can you describe a little bit between the French experience and the Via de la Plata experience?
Yeah, so the Frances, it's very social. Because there's so many people that walk portions of that route or the whole route. It's well supported. I mean, I tell people that you really could really not have much of a plan, and you could just drop yourself somewhere on the Frances and you'd be fine. I mean, there'd be support, there'd be other pilgrims, there'd be plenty of places to stay, to find food. And for some people, depending on when they're going, it's a little crowded. It's actually, there's a lot of people. When I went in the fall, there were times when it was busier than other times. And of course, the closer you get to Santiago, the more people are coming on the Camino. But I had many hours every day of solitude. I mean, I might see pilgrims in front of me, or I might look back and see pilgrims behind me, but I had a lot of time to that kind of just personal reflection. I wanted something completely different when I chose the Via de la Plata. I knew that very few people walked that route, and I knew that there were long days, not all of them, but some of the days really literally just to get from one town to the next town would be the entire day. So you'd have to have your own water, your own food. There would be no place to stop other than just, sitting on the ground somewhere. I knew that ahead of time, but I wasn't really prepared for how that would affect me. It's very different. If the Frances is more social and well supported, the Via de la Plata is more quiet and isolated, and honestly challenging. It's challenging physically. It can be challenging mentally because of all of the planning that you have to do along the way, figuring out lodging and all of the things that kind of can come together easily on the Frances, you have to actually kind of work at harder on the Via de la Plata. Even things like, oh, I'm going to have an entire day without passing through a town. Do I have enough water? Do I have enough food? Do I have all the things that I need? And it was challenging for me emotionally because I did not even come across another pilgrim until the 9th day. And, I'm very comfortable being by myself. I tend to be a person that's, comfortable with that. But at the same time, it affected me greatly. I really missed some of that human connection, especially with other pilgrims. And then even when you do come across pilgrims on the Via de la Plata, I found that they tended to be, what would be the word? More to themselves. Like one of the reasons they chose the Via de la Plata is they didn't want to be around a bunch of people. And so even when you do come across them sometimes, they're not as interested in having engaging conversations or talking a lot. They tend to be kind of, having this inward journey. So the Frances has the ability to be an inward journey, but there's a lot of things going around outside of you. Whereas on the Via de la Plata, you're really forced to spend a lot of time inside of yourself. And for some people, that could be really challenging, especially if they're not used to doing that.
How many kilometers in average you walk in Via de la Plata?
Well, I mean, I did the 1,000 and some odd kilometers, I think, in about 32 days. So that worked out to be, well, in miles, it was about 20 miles. So that would probably be roughly 30 plus kilometers every day. I mean, and there were days that were much higher than that. I think I even had a day that might have been over 50 kilometers. Which is just pure insanity. I mean, that's just so far to walk. And that would have been my choice. That wouldn't have been that I had to walk that far. It would have been a choice that I made. And of course, there were shorter days as well. But the larger challenge between the two of them is that the towns, there aren't as many towns and they're not spaced so close to each other. So there's going to be some long days. And so you have to be prepared for that.
Okay, that's 50 kilometers, for example. Do you remember how long it takes you to go those 50 kilometers?
Oh, it probably would have been 12 or 13 hours. Yeah. I mean,
13 hours of walking.
I'm not a fast walker. In fact, I'm often, if I'm with other pilgrims, I'm often the slowest one. It's not that I walk quickly, but I do just keep going. And I noticed that on the Francés too, because on the Francés, I mean, I covered that 800 and something kilometers in 25 days, which is not normal. In fact, I don't even recommend it to people because, that's a lot too. I noticed that when other people were stopping, I just kept going, right? So if people were stopping for lunch, I just kept going. If people were stopping to take breaks, I just kept going. So it wasn't so much that I walked quickly. I just walked continuously with very little rest, for many hours. On the Francés, I probably averaged 8 to 10 hours a day walking. And it would have been roughly the same thing on the Via de la Plata, but just more days. And some of those days were, of course, longer.
Okay. Will you be willing to walk another Camino?
I would, definitely. So what's interesting is I came back from the Francés thinking, I don't know that I'll do one of these again. It was a once in a lifetime, life-changing experience. I thought that's good, right? Kind of like I did it. And then, as I said, it was calling me back. I just felt the need to go back. When I came back from the Via de la Plata, I mean, I literally wanted to get right back on a plane and go back to Spain. To a certain degree, and it took me a while to kind of figure out what was going on. Like, why was this so different? I mean, I've described some of the differences of the route, but why did it affect me in such a different way? Because it truly was a very different Camino for me. In a sense, I came back feeling unfulfilled, and that had nothing to do with the Camino, right? That was all me. And it literally took me a year after returning from the Via de la Plata. It took me a year to start to understand, why was I feeling unfulfilled? Why did I have, I don't want to say negative feelings, but very different feelings about that experience. And so I immediately wanted to go back. And it's a lot to ask of my employer and my family, and to disappear for a month. And they've been gracious enough to let me do that 2 times. So I have some mixed feelings about asking all of these people that support me in one way or another to let me go do another one of these. But I almost feel as if I need to go back to kind of like make things right for me. Some of the stuff that I realized a year later was that I had the wrong mindset, and that I was kind of going about that second Camino, I would say, in the wrong way, and that affected my experience. And so having learned from that, I kind of feel like, well, let me try again, right? And there's no guarantee that a third time would be anything in particular, right? I mean, every Camino has its own thing that you can't predict how that's going to turn out in the end. But yes, the short answer to your question is I would like to go back, and I would like to again walk some different routes, maybe some that kind of connect to the Francés, so that you're spending a little time on the Francés, but then you're spending time on other routes. You kind of get a mix of the solitary versus the crowded, but I don't know when that will happen. I mean, I'm a few years away from retiring from my my corporate work, so maybe I would wait until I don't have the job responsibilities, or maybe not. I mean, I'm not getting any younger, and I really noticed that 6 years between the first Camino and the second. I turned 60 while I was on the Via de la Plata, and I felt every day of those extra 6 years between the Frances and the Via de la Plata, I noticed physically how much harder it was. So part of me thinks if I need to get back to Spain, I probably need to do it sooner versus later, just so that my body can handle it.
Okay, but you know that there are even people that are 80, 85
Oh,
years
I
old that
know.
still
I
keep
know.
walking.
I just actually, in my most recent presentation about the Camino, I had someone come up to me to talk about their father, who's 85, and he not only does Caminos every year, but he does what you were sharing earlier, like the gentleman from Denmark. He goes to other countries within Europe and starts from those countries and spends months walking across Europe, and it's just incredible. I can't even imagine at 85 years old being able to do something like that. But yeah, there's a lot of people on the Camino that are much older than me. So
Okay, and then so talking about stress, you know that when you are working and when you are in your day-to-day life, there are stress all around. So, and then at the Camino, it's not like there are challenges still, but the stress is out pretty much. Why would you say that happened?
well, if you choose to leave everything behind, if you choose to not be checking your emails, if you choose to not pay attention to the news, the stock market, your favorite sports teams, all of the things that kind of consume our normal day, if you choose to just let go of all of that while you're on the Camino, it's a simple existence. And that's a great lesson to bring back home, that if we can find a way to live more simply, it actually reduces a lot of stress. I mean, on the Camino, there aren't that many things that you're doing. I mean, you get up in the morning and you start walking, and at some point you stop. And the only things that you do in between starting and stopping is, eating and resting, and maybe showering or doing laundry once in a while, maybe doing a little shopping for food. You're interacting with other pilgrims, but it's like, that's it. Now, I know some people on the Camino, they're still staying very connected. They're on their phones, they're checking their emails, they're even in meetings. I can't imagine doing a Camino like that, because the whole purpose for me is to disconnect, and I don't want those extra stresses on me. But if you choose to do it simply, there's not that much that you have to worry about. Now, I will say on the Via de la Plata, I had to do so much planning, not only before I went, but along the way. And a lot of the planning was logistics. Where am I going to wind up? What do I have to do about food? Where am I going to stay? Because there aren't as many albergues. And so you might be having to book hotels, and you have to do that, on booking.com on your phone. And so I found myself being a little bit more kind of like almost like I am in my normal daily routine, where I'm planning and organizing. I found myself having to do a lot of that on the Via de la Plata. But again, that might have been because of the way that I chose to do it. That might have been one of those things that I could have done it differently, but I didn't allow myself to. I felt like I had to, and that's actually part of, who I am, is this struggle of how much do I try to control things versus how much do I just let things be? And the beautiful thing about a Camino is that you can often just let things be. And that actually takes a tremendous load off of your head, your shoulders, your back. I mean, but I felt like on the Via de la Plata, I had to be more in control. And again, I'm not suggesting that that would be everybody's experience, but that's kind of what I went in with. And so I had a little bit more stress in addition to just the physical stress of the long days, the emotional stress of not seeing people. And I think all of that kind of impacted this feeling unfulfilled when I came back, because it was not the experience that I was expecting. Still an amazing experience. I'm thankful for it, and I learned a lot, but not at all like the Francés had been.
Okay, and then the Francés is known because it's very well marked. So where you have posts every so often, but I probably the Via La Plata is not the same. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I think the marking is actually not bad. The bigger challenge, I think, is that you're not seeing other pilgrims. And you realize that when you have other pilgrims around, it's pretty hard to get lost because you're seeing people in the distance ahead of you. Or if you feel like you might be lost, you turn around and you look behind and you notice that, oh, there's some people coming. I can see them in the distance. There'd be entire days on the Via de la Plata where I didn't see anybody. And so you do kind of get a little more disoriented because maybe you haven't seen a yellow arrow for a period of time, or you're traveling also through several distinct regions of Spain. And all of these regions, they're almost like what states would be in the United States. These regions have their own rules and regulations, even about the signage on the Camino. So while the yellow arrow is kind of the typical thing to look for, the way that that yellow arrow is presented to you changes as you go through these different regions of Spain. And so you're not always looking for the same thing. And you're going through a lot of people's private property. You're walking through a lot of people's farmland. I don't think I've ever opened and closed as many gates as I did on the Via de la Plata, because you're literally just walking through pastures and walking on private property. It's really incredible that the owners of this land, are okay with pilgrims coming through. Maybe that would be different if there were hundreds of them every day. So it can be a little more challenging to find the markings, but I think overall the markings are there. It's just harder to stay focused on them.
Okay. Well, then, what advice would you provide to someone that is considering to walk the Camino and is trying to get out of stress, and the Camino is one of the options? What would you say to that person?
Well, I do think regardless of what route you take, the ability to try to let go of expectations, of planning. There's so much out there. I mean, you're providing an example of valuable information that people who are either brand new to the Camino or just thinking about it, or maybe they've walked Caminos, they enjoy listening to you and the people that you interview. And there's so many videos, and there's so many websites, and there's so many resources that if a person is kind of like a planner, it's almost overwhelming. And so I would say find the few resources that really work for you, and don't worry about all the hundreds and thousands of other things that are out there. Plan less, I guess, is what I'm saying. I think we can get too wrapped up into trying to know everything ahead of time. Just let the Camino be what it's going to be. You'll be okay, right? That would be one piece of advice. Another piece of advice, and that I've experienced personally, it really is helpful to know some Spanish. When I went on the Francés, I kind of thought, well, I took some Spanish in high school decades ago. That's probably enough. Well, on the Francés, you can kind of get by with that because a lot of people are going to speak English, especially other pilgrims. But on something like the Via de la Plata, no, you're going to be walking through towns where people don't speak English. Why would they, right? And so the fact that you can't communicate with people, that becomes its own problem, right? So, and even on the Francés, I felt like I couldn't connect with local people as much as I would like to because I wasn't comfortable speaking the language. So certainly you don't have to be an expert, and be fluent in Spanish, but for someone that doesn't know Spanish, you should really learn some. What else could I say? Depending on the route, just be prepared for what it's going to be. Whether it's going to be a real physical challenge. Some of the routes are much harder, frankly, more mountainous, longer days. That requires physical abilities that you want to be prepared for. The Via de la Plata is more remote. You're not going to see a lot of people. You need to kind of prepare yourself emotionally. So each of the routes have kind of their own flavor. You want to know a little bit about that so that you can be prepared for it. But those would be my basic pieces of advice, and keep it as simple as you possibly can. I tend to over prepare. That's my default.
Okay.
And I think I don't think it's necessary. And I think it can actually take away from the experience because now you have all these expectations about how you thought it was going to be. Because I watched all these videos and I did all this research and I planned everything out. And then you get there and you realize all those plans on the second day could be tossed out the window and you just start having your Camino experience every day, which is amazing.
Yeah. Everyone experiences their Camino in a different way.
Exactly.
And there are a ton of reasons for walking the Camino.
Right.
And the resources are outside. The idea is that help you, but then, like you mentioned, don't get so stressed because about the information about the Camino, there is too many.
Yes, I agree.
And there is very good information, and there is so, and there is information that is not worth it. But
right.
if you keep looking and looking and looking, you're gonna get so stressed that at the end you're gonna say, "I'm not gonna be walking the Camino. It's too much preparation." But it's not like that. It's the experience of the life. In my case, at least.
And I don't know if other people have had this experience, but I actually planned much more for my second Camino than I did my first. Now, part of that was because I knew it required a little more planning. I knew that I had to be more prepared because I was going to be more on my own. But way beyond that, having experienced a Camino, it was almost as if in my mind, I knew too much. I knew about all the different things that could potentially, be something that you would have to deal with. Where when I went on my first Camino, I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I did a little bit of planning, but the whole experience was brand new. When I went back the second time, I almost felt obsessive about having a plan for everything, and that again is my fault. I should not have gone into it with that mindset because it prevented me from just letting it flow, just letting it be what it was going to be. So be careful, on a second Camino, because you know so much more than you knew the first time. Don't translate that into, oh, well, I need to prepare for even more things because I know about all these things. If anything, I would say you should probably plan less if you're going back a second or a third or a fourth time and be more open because you know that it can be that way and you'll be fine. You'll be safe. It'll be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Blaine, thank you very much for the conversation, for being here today. And for you pilgrims, thank you for watching us, and please keep adding your comments. And buen camino.
Buen Camino. Thank you.